Hello YouTube, I am Nibutron and today we're going to discuss Zack Snyder's Justice League. Now I am someone who hated the original and I decided to sit through 4 hours of the Snyder cut entirely of my own volition. And I knew full well that if I hated this version too, I'd have nobody but myself to blame. But I did this so you potentially don't have to, and that kind of dedication is really what matters here. Needless to say that this review will contain heavy spoilers, so if you want to watch the movie yourself, go right ahead and do it, but don't forget to head right back here to check out this review. Also, this is a new channel and my very first video, so whether you agree or not, if you think I make any decent points, or if you think this review has maybe no substance whatsoever but you still like the sound of my voice, don't hesitate to give me a thumbs up and follow to help me out. It'd be very much appreciated. Before I get into it, I think the fans deserve some recognition here because they really pushed hard for this movie to see the light of day, and I think they have a lot to be happy about. Were they a little overzealous at times? Absolutely, but ultimately they've gone some way to show that there was a real hunger out there for this movie, and also to do right by director Zack Snyder, who you kind of feel was betrayed a little in the whole run up to the original release. Anyway, I want to dive right in, but it's difficult to know where to begin with the 4-hour movie. 4 hours is a really long time. I guess I can start with the obvious. This version is superior to the original release. It's much better. But then almost anything would be, wouldn't it? It doesn't tell you much about the movie to say that it's better than the original, because the original release is so astonishingly bad. It's the movie that more or less ended the whole DCEU project and forced Warner Brothers to explore a different way to represent DC Comics in cinema. So where do I start? Although this movie is 4 hours long, and this might be controversial, it's largely pretty forgettable. I mean, there are a few highlights in there that feel better than the original version, but nothing that had any lasting impact. After I watched it, I immediately forgot it, and even now I struggle to understand what happened in those 4 hours of my life. And I might be piling on more controversy here, but this is not really a new movie. Yeah, I know fans will beg to differ and insist that it is, but the core of it is pretty much the same as the original. We have Steppenwolf, who is the big bad. There are mother boxes. Steppenwolf gets the mother boxes. Heroes unite to save the day. Red in brackets, Superman unites to save the day, or arrives to save the day, however you want to put it. Steppenwolf is defeated. The end. Pretty much exactly the same. What is new is how Snyder gets you through that, and this time it's much improved. It's definitely altered enough to feel like a new movie, which is, I guess, enough to justify its existence. Character motivations are slightly different, character personalities are wildly different, there isn't any of that bizarre Whedon humour that was so out of place in the original. It's more robust, it's more fleshed out, and really, if this movie highlights anything, it's that it needed an extra 2 hours just to make the plot and story coherent. The truth is, this movie needed to be 4 hours long, but mostly due to poor strategy by Warner Brothers. I may upset a few people here with Marvel comparisons, but they can't be escaped, I'm afraid. You see, whatever criticisms you might have of how episodic Marvel movies feel with their standalone movies for their singular characters, they do serve to flesh and develop those characters in those movies extremely well. And what it means is that whenever these characters appear on screen with each other, we understand their personal stakes and personalities quite intimately in relation to one another, and it allows for interesting clashes and usually great chemistry. However, in Justice League we have the Flash, we have Aquaman, and we have Cyborg. These are 3 characters who are meeting for the very first time, and they make up 50% of the team. Not to mention, Superman is barely in this movie, and he doesn't really have what you'd call a relationship with Batman and Wonder Woman, the only 2 established characters. And sure, we've now had an Aquaman solo movie, but remember, this is essentially the same story from 2017. The Aquaman standalone movie released a year later. What this means is we need to spend a lot more time trying to develop these characters, just enough that we can barely care about them. The original movie didn't even try to do this, and to Snyder's credit, he spends much of his time in this version attempting to rectify that, but I'd say with mixed results. For example, Cyborg comes across as pretty annoying and broody in the original because you don't really know anything about him, but in Snyder's version you have a much greater sense of who he is. The scene where he learns about the potential of his abilities through a dictaphone recording from his father is incredibly creative. We follow him around as he kind of cyberstalks a struggling mother with a kind soul who steals money to give to a homeless person, before learning that she's unfortunately been evicted and made homeless herself. We get to see Cyborg take pity on her and use his abilities to give her a life-changing sum of money. It's a short montage that does wonders for helping us understand that although Victor Stone is mostly super advanced living alloy, he still has a very real heart. In fact, Cyborg, played by Ray Fisher, is the real winner of the Snyder Cut. He's the only character that has a real affecting character arc, explored through his relationship with his own physical form and his damaged relationship with his father. Or take Barry Allen. We get a short scene where he saves a young woman who is driving an excellent car, by the way. I mean, look at this thing. I really want to know what she does for a living. But this is while he's interviewing for a job at what looks like a pet shelter, and afterwards we see it's a great opportunity that shows more of his wit and humour and his heroic impulse. And that's the thing, we want to like these heroes, so it's really important that we see them doing these things independently to actually ground their identities as heroes. Snyder at least understands this, and while this scene, like many others, has a ridiculous amount of slow motion in it, like a lot, and feels a little disjointed, it still mostly works. Snyder also tries to push more for Barry Allen's character development. We see more of Barry's trips to prison to visit his father, and there's a short monologue at the end of the movie, or near the end, that doesn't quite feel earned, but these are examples of the bare minimum that's required to help us care about these characters. The question is, does it work? And I guess the answer is a little, but mostly no. While Zack was right to revise almost all of the horrible, yucky attempts at wacky, ill-fitting Joss Whedon humour from the script, it still feels very, very flat. There is zero charm in this movie, and not in the DCEU is for serious adult superhero movie viewers kind of way. It lacks charm in a lifeless, disinterested, boring kind of way. I am grateful that Aquaman isn't trying to unsuccessfully hit on Wonder Woman in every other scene in this version. I mean, Aquaman even seems to have a bit of integrity, but there's still no chemistry between any of these guys. And look, I hate to bang on about the Marvel movies, but say what you want about them, when Marvel characters interact with one another, you can tell that even scripted dialogue could be improvised. It flows, it feels natural. There's none of that here. Everything feels rigid and wooden. Sometimes it borders on practical disinterest. I mean, we know more about the characters for sure, but that doesn't necessarily translate into caring for the characters, because personality in characters comes from actual character development, and simply knowing more about them doesn't really cut it. Their personalities don't complement or mesh, they don't even clash, they kind of just sit there beside one another throughout the whole movie. But I want to look at the characters, and I'm going to start with Batman, because Batman is one of my favourite characters of all time. Batman barely does anything in this movie other than drive hilariously jarring product placed Mercedes cars, wave money around, and absorb energy in his gauntlets. Clark, no. This is a character with a genius level intellect, particularly when it comes to strategy, whose best idea in the movie is to resurrect Superman, which isn't so much as an idea but rather the only option once they learn it's possible to do. In one of the early skirmishes, he seems to relish in not having an actual plan. So much so that Flash, the youngest member of the team I might add, is visibly concerned. This is Batman we're talking about. If there's one thing Batman always has, it's a plan. It's pretty much an internet meme at this point.
The plans were mine.
Yours? What now?
I've carefully studied every Justice Leaguer, past and present, and created contingency plans to neutralize you, should that ever become necessary.
Superman is reduced to a mostly mute godlike meat shield who is literally just there to embarrass and pummel Steppenwolf at the end. His last time on screen, if you remember, was spent sacrificing himself for the good of mankind to kill Doomsday after Batman decided to spare him for some bizarre reason. Oh wait, it was because his mother's name is Martha, and it reminded Batman that his own mother's name was Martha, and for some reason he thought maybe Superman knows his mom or knew his mom, or maybe he was going to kill Martha. Anyway, in case you haven't guessed, I think Batman vs Superman is a terrible, terrible movie. Aquaman is comically forgettable in the Snyder Cut, but to be fair, it's probably because this movie releasing after the 2018 movie, but being set before it, can't do much with him as a character without it complicating the timeline. Martian Manhunter does not need to be in this movie. Okay, it's nice that he is, but maybe at least not in the scene with Lois, where he pretends to be Martha Kent, because it serves no purpose at all for anything. I mean, sure, he encourages her to go back to work, but we never see her work in the movie, so what's the point of that? And yes, I mean, she has this kind of daily ritual where she visits the destroyed Superman statue, but by the time she's ready to go back and let go, Superman is back anyway. It's not like it's hard to miss Superman returning from the dead. He flies, most of the time through skyscrapers while razing Metropolis to the ground. Okay, that was definitely harsh. I actually liked Man of Steel. I take that back. Martian Manhunter's appearance at the end fits much better as a cameo, but maybe that's just me. And we have Wonder Woman and Flash, who are more interesting to watch whenever they're on the screen. Flash may be edging it over Wonder Woman, but it is definitely Cyborg who ends up being the most compelling to watch. Ray Fisher really stands out, delivering a tortured character who struggles to come to terms with his nature and his father's part in creating him. Like I mentioned earlier, Cyborg ends up being the only character who has anything close to an effective developing arc in the movie, but this does nothing for chemistry between everybody else. I do want to talk about Steppenwolf though. Don't get me wrong, overall Steppenwolf is vastly improved, but that's really just aesthetics. Beyond that, he's a terrible villain. Who on earth cares about this guy? We know he wants to get back into Darkseid's good books, who he's upset at some point, but we don't know how or why. And beyond that, we absolutely know nothing about his own goals or desires. What motivates him? Why does it motivate him? Does he have an identity outside of being a lackey for Darkseid? Who knows? Who cares? Does he even care? What's his opinion on climate change? Maybe it'd be okay if Darkseid played more of a role in this movie, but he doesn't. Steppenwolf is the big bad guy, but he has absolutely no gravitas. He's improved because at least this time, he actually looks like an imposing villain. Villains, sometimes even more than heroes, need charisma. You don't need to agree with them. I mean, if you do, that would probably mean you're psychotic. But if you understand them, it goes a long way towards making them interesting to watch. Steppenwolf is not interesting to watch in any frame or scene whatsoever. He is very shiny though, which is cool I guess. And why does he have almost no dialogue with any of the other heroes but have this weird obsession with Wonder Woman? Like, I do get that he fought the Amazons, but it's not like they beat him, wounded him, really hurt him at all. He easily defeats them, but he goes on as if he has this personal vendetta with Wonder Woman that I found pretty bizarre. Maybe I missed something. In fact, Steppenwolf spends most of this movie shrugging off every attack thrown at him. Then at the end, Superman appears and just repeatedly punches him in the face a lot, and it's over. I have to talk briefly about the music. It might just be me, but I found it very jarring. I mean, I was physically shaking my head every time the Wonder Woman yokel theme blared out just because Wonder Woman had appeared on the screen. The music in this movie most of the time was genuinely distracting. It wasn't all bad, to be fair. Some of the times it was amazing, but on the whole it felt super disjointed and poorly edited. Sometimes it was loud and booming where it felt inappropriate, or it just didn't fit the feel or tone of a particular scene. Overall, I found it to be a letdown. Still, it's not all bad. This movie is the better version after all, and Snyder has added a lot that helps it benefit. In fact, this version is real vindication for Snyder and a lesson in trusting a director's vision. This movie is coherent in tone, and it doesn't feel like a Frankenstein's monster level mess anymore. It feels like a movie made with a singular vision and a real deliberate intention, and Snyder clearly lays threads he intends to follow up in later movies that were part of his original vision for the universe. This movie benefits massively, and I mean massively, from improved visual effects. It really shows that when you give artists time and space, they can transform the visuals entirely, which in any superhero movie is so incredibly important. I can't state enough how improved Steppenwolf is in design and fidelity here. I personally don't like the Darkseid design all that much, and I'm not a huge fan of the whole Snyder muted tone thing, but that's personal taste rather than it actually looking bad, and I think Steppenwolf looks genuinely brilliant. If you go back and watch the original, it becomes even more clear just how bad the original version of Steppenwolf was, and that's not really down to talent, but time and maybe vision. The original movie was rushed out, but here Snyder's able to spend money and time getting his villain right, and the movie benefits massively for it. In fact, the effects across the board are improved dramatically. No more weird moustacheless Henry Cavill or weird red mesh of nothingness as a backdrop in the final third of the movie. Across the board, there have been artistic changes in colour, tone and detail that dramatically improve the look and make it feel like the movie it was intended to be. As with the original, for me, the best action scenes in this movie are still the early scenes with the Amazons. Every scene therein is electric. Snyder's adept at creating vast warlike battle scenes, and I think he's more at home directing scenes like this than maybe choreographing multiple superpowered heroes on the screen together. In this version, the fight early on is slightly different, but it feels much better. The Amazon warriors are amazing. It really feels like you're watching the best warriors on any planet, anywhere. And they move with a fluidity and coordination that really isn't matched anywhere else in the movie. The early scene where they go to battle with Steppenwolf in an effort to protect the mother box is still one of the best in the movie. I feel the same way about Wonder Woman's opening scene. This is also different and improved from the original. Wonder Woman confronting the terrorists by bursting through the door is a minor thing, but it's such a cool display of visual power, and I find it more effective than say shockwaves as Superman punches Steppenwolf the same exact way for the umpteenth time. There is too much slow motion in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Way too much. And I don't know why. I don't know why there is so much slow motion. It doesn't do anything for me personally, and I guess for Flash scenes maybe it's unavoidable, but it's so over the top and there are no attempts to add a twist to it or spice it up in any way. But let me give an example of good use of slow motion in the Snyder Cut. So when Superman is brought back to life and everyone's getting pummeled by him, Barry speeds up and runs up to him and everything slows down. But as he gets closer, Superman's eyes follow his movement and he turns to face him before he can get there. And you can see the shock on Barry's face because speed is his universe, it's his domain, it's where he's most at home, and this is the first time that someone has been able to even follow his movement, let alone react to it. All of this is communicated in slow motion in a sequence without any dialogue in a really effective way, and it makes the scene so much more powerful as a result. Now I know this might be too much to ask for every use of slow motion in the movie 4 hours long, but with so much of it, you hope for more creative examples like that one. And the overuse of it takes away from the impact of the climax where Flash is supposedly running faster than he ever has before, because by that point, it's honestly hard to care. Still, this doesn't take away from the vast improvement in the visuals overall. I think the best thing about this movie though is that it's just much more coherent this time. The plot is still quite simple and the villain is not very compelling, but it's a movie that makes sense and it takes its time with its characters and build up. Snyder isn't afraid to leave a small scene in if it adds a tiny bit of meaning or depth, even if it doesn't serve to push the plot along. And while I criticized this with the early Martian Manhunter reveal, on the whole it's appreciated even though this movie is so long. Oddly enough, it even helps a bit with the pacing. While I'm not convinced by Jared Leto's Joker, the nightmare scene near the end of the movie, which to my knowledge is completely new, is a nice touch too, and you can't help but feel happy that Snyder finally gets to communicate his original vision to his fans and just for himself as a director. While the movie is very long, too long really, I didn't feel like it was disjointed narratively, and I was happy enough to go along for the ride. Breaking it into parts with titled chapters really helped to streamline the vast runtime too, so you felt you were being steered through the movie with purpose. So how do I conclude this? Zack Snyder's Justice League is a massive improvement over the original, but almost anything would be. This is largely the same movie and that's why many of the original weaknesses are still there, but this time you're getting a much more complete and robust project. Should you sit through 4 hours of this? Well, if you enjoyed the original somehow, or you're a big DC or Snyder fan, it's an easy yes, you're gonna have a good time. But if you hated the original or you aren't invested in the universe, then this probably isn't worth your time. It is a good movie, but it's not a great movie, and 4 hours is really too much to ask for just a good movie. I give Zack Snyder's Justice League a 3 out of 5. Thank you very much if you stuck with me to the end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to follow me and leave a like. This is a new channel and I want to give you more reviews on TV, movies or games you're watching or playing right now. What did you think of the Snyder Cut? Was I way off the mark? Did I miss the point? Or maybe you agree with me? Leave a comment below and let me know. Until next time.